The dinner at the upscale restaurant was supposed to be a celebration of our historic marketing campaign. But just as the champagne was being poured, our new CEO stood up, flashed an artificial smile, and announced my termination, right in front of clients, colleagues, and people I had trained from day one. I sat frozen. But a stranger at the next table rose and spoke words that would change my life. "I've been following your work for 2 years. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, come to my office." And that's when the silent revenge began. A billion-dollar game they never saw coming. My name is Amanda Griffin. Until that night, I was the 34-year-old director of content strategy at Halden & Rowe, one of Chicago's premier advertising agencies. I had built my career on understanding people, what moves them, what makes them click, what turns a casual browser into a loyal customer. For 7 years, I had climbed the corporate ladder, surviving 3 management changes and countless restructurings. Each time, I emerged stronger, more valuable to the company. Or so I thought. The evening had started perfectly. We were celebrating landing the Lumina account, a luxury cosmetics brand that would add at least $30 million to our annual revenue. My team had worked tirelessly for months, analyzing market trends, studying consumer behavior, and crafting a strategy that spoke directly to Lumina's target demographic. The presentation I delivered earlier that day had been flawless. Even Camilla Reeves, Lumina's notoriously difficult CMO, had nodded approvingly throughout. To new beginnings. Landon Pike, our CEO of 6 months, had declared when we first sat down, raising his glass in a toast that seemed directed at me. I should have noticed the cold calculation behind his smile, the way his eyes never quite met mine. The restaurant, Aurelia, was Chicago's newest culinary hotspot, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline and Lake Michigan beyond. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the white tablecloths, while servers in immaculate uniforms moved silently between tables. At our long table sat 12 people, the core team from Halden & Rowe, including Landon, key executives from Lumina, and a couple of industry influencers Landon had invited to witness the beginning of a beautiful partnership. The first warning sign came when Landon insisted I sit at the far end of the table, away from Camilla and the other Lumina executives, whom I had been cultivating for months. I had brushed it off as a quirk of seating arrangements. The second warning was his constant interruptions whenever I tried to explain the nuances of our strategy to the clients. Each time, he would cut in with, "What Amanda means to say is," or "Let me simplify what she's trying to express." By the time the main course arrived, a perfectly seared duck breast that I was too unsettled to enjoy, I felt a distinct chill in the air. The conversation flowed around me, but somehow never to me. Then, as the servers cleared our plates and prepared to bring dessert, Landon tapped his glass with a fork. "Before we continue this wonderful evening," he began, his voice carrying easily across the table and to nearby diners, "I want to address something important." He turned to face me directly. "Amanda, you've been with Halden & Rowe for many years, and your contributions have been noted." The pause spoke volumes. My stomach clenched. However, as we pivot toward a more innovative approach to content strategy, we find ourselves needing leadership that embraces cutting-edge methodologies rather than clinging to traditional frameworks. The table fell silent. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade. Effective immediately, we'll be restructuring the content strategy department. Amanda, your position has been eliminated. We'll need your keycard and company devices by noon tomorrow. The words hung in the air like poison. I felt the blood drain from my face as 12 pairs of eyes turned to me, some confused, some embarrassed, none offering support. These were people I had worked alongside for years. People whose careers I'd nurtured, people I'd considered friends. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice barely audible. The Lumina pitch was successful. The strategy was adequate. Landon cut in smoothly. But adequate isn't what Halden & Rowe stands for anymore. We're redefining excellence. He turned to Camilla. Which is why we're bringing in Marcus Devlin to take over the account. You might know him from his work with London's top luxury brands. Camilla nodded, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to object. I realized then that this had been planned. Landon had already discussed the transition with her. Perhaps even used my impending termination as a selling point. Now, Landon continued, turning back to the table at large. Shall we order dessert? I recommend the chocolate soufflé. And just like that, my career implosion became a footnote to the dinner conversation. The table gradually returned to light chatter, though a few colleagues darted guilty glances my way. I sat motionless, my champagne untouched, as the reality of what had just happened washed over me. 7 years of dedication, of late nights and early mornings, of canceled vacations and postponed personal life, all dismissed in a 40-second speech over dinner. I was contemplating how to exit with what little dignity remained when I felt a presence beside me. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit had approached from a nearby table. He appeared to be in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and intense gray eyes that missed nothing. Excuse the interruption, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear him clearly. He placed a heavy cream-colored business card on the table beside me. Victor Lane, Blackhearth Ventures. I've been following your work since your presentation at the Digital Experience Summit 2 years ago, particularly interested in the predictive consumer behavior model you outlined. I blinked in surprise. That presentation had been sparsely attended, a morning slot on the final day of the conference. Competing with more popular speakers, I had discussed a theoretical framework for using AI to analyze and predict consumer behavior in real time, something I had been developing in my spare time but had never been given resources to pursue at Halden and Rowe. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Victor continued. My office. The address is on the card. His eyes flicked toward Landon, who was now regaling the table with an anecdote about his recent skiing trip in Aspen. Some people mistake innovation for something they can control. Others recognize it as a force of nature. He gave me a slight nod. Tomorrow, Ms. Griffin. Before I could respond, he had turned and walked away, leaving me holding his card. It was heavy stock, minimalist in design, with just his name, company, and an address in Chicago's West Loop. No phone number, no email. I looked up to see Landon watching me, his expression souring at the interaction he had witnessed but couldn't hear. In that moment, something hardened inside me. I placed the untouched champagne flute on the table, gathered my purse, and stood. Excuse me, I said to no one in particular. No one tried to stop me as I walked out of Aurelia into the cold Chicago night. The next morning, I arrived at the address on Victor's card precisely at 9. The building was a renovated industrial space, all exposed brick and steel beams. But the interior had been transformed into a sleek, modern office. The receptionist, a young woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, escorted me directly to Victor's office without asking for identification, as if I had been expected. Victor's space occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, unlike the ostentatious corner offices I was used to seeing in the advertising world. His was minimalist, a glass desk, an ergonomic chair, and a wall of screens displaying data feeds I couldn't immediately decipher. No awards, no family photos, no golf clubs in the corner. Amanda, he said, rising from his desk as I entered. Thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair across from him. Coffee? I declined. After a sleepless night reviewing my options, which ranged from limited to non-existent in Chicago's tight-knit advertising community, I was running on adrenaline and spite. Mr. Lane. Victor, please. Victor, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm still not clear on why I'm here. He studied me for a moment, then pressed a button on his desk. The wall of windows instantly frosted over, offering privacy from any potential observers. Blackhearth Ventures is primarily known as a private equity firm. He began. What's less known as our special projects division. We identify undervalued intellectual assets, ideas, concepts, sometimes entire business models that have been overlooked or deliberately suppressed, and we develop them, either as standalone ventures or as components of our existing portfolio. He tapped something on his desk, and one of the wall screens changed to display a familiar diagram. My consumer behavior prediction model from the conference 2 years ago. This, he said, pointing to the screen, is brilliance that has been gathering dust. A real-time AI engine that not only tracks consumer interaction with content but predicts responsive patterns and adapts messaging accordingly. He turned back to me. Halden and Rowe never developed it, did they? I shook my head. They said it was too resource-intensive, too speculative for client work. Yet you continued refining it on your own time. It wasn't a question. I wondered how he knew. What if I told you that I'm prepared to provide full funding, a team of your choosing, and complete creative control to develop this into a market-ready platform? Victor's gaze was steady, evaluating, with one condition: absolute secrecy. No public announcements, no press releases, no LinkedIn updates. You and your team would essentially become ghosts in the corporate world until we're ready to launch. I leaned forward. Why the secrecy? Victor's lips curved into a slight smile. Disruption works best when it's unexpected. The moment we announce what we're building, every major agency and tech company will rush to create competing products. We want to be 6 months ahead of the market, minimum. He wasn't wrong. The advertising world was cutthroat, with agencies routinely stealing ideas from each other, often poaching the creators along with their concepts. And what happens when we launch? Won't Halden and Rowe claim I stole their intellectual property? Victor's smile widened. Did you sign an innovation assignment agreement when you joined them? I nodded. Standard practice in the industry. Anything created while employed belongs to the company. And did they ever formally acknowledge your model, assign resources to it, include it in any client proposals or internal development roadmaps? No, I admitted. They actually removed it from my performance objectives last year, saying it wasn't aligned with the company's strategic direction. Then they abandoned it. Victor's tone was matter of fact. Our legal team can handle any challenges. The question is, are you willing to build something revolutionary? Knowing that for months, your former colleagues, including Landon Pike, will believe they've succeeded in sidelining you? I thought about the public humiliation at Aurelia, about 7 years of having my ideas either dismissed or claimed by others, about the future stretching before me, trying to find another mid-level position at a competing agency, starting over with diminished leverage and the stain of having been fired. Who would be on this team? I asked. Victor nodded, apparently expecting the question. Your choice entirely. Up to 7 people to start. The only requirement is discretion. 7 people, not a large team by agency standards, but enough if they were the right people. And I knew exactly who they should be. I'll need Milo Resnick, I said, former senior developer at Halden and Rowe. He was blamed for a system failure that was actually caused by an inadequate server capacity, something he had warned management about repeatedly. Victor made a note. Who else? Sierra Washington, data analyst. She identified financial discrepancies in client reporting last year and was pushed out for creating unnecessary concern. Another note. Jonas Kapoor, QA lead who protected me during a failed audit by taking responsibility for timeline slippages that were actually caused by executive interference. I continued naming former colleagues who had been similarly discarded by Halden and Rowe, talented individuals who had either stood on principle or simply been in the wrong place when blame needed to be assigned. People who, like me, had reason to want to prove themselves. Victor listened without comment, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he nodded once. We'll reach out to them today, assuming they agree to our terms. How quickly can you begin? I thought about my apartment lease, 8 months remaining, my financial cushion, 3 months at best, and my professional reputation, currently in free fall. Immediately, I said. Victor extended his hand. Welcome to Project Obsidian Spark, Amanda. As I shook his hand, I had no way of knowing that this moment marked the beginning of not just a new career, but a reckoning that would reshape the advertising landscape of Chicago and beyond. Within a week, Victor had secured a workspace for us, a converted warehouse on the edge of Lincoln Park, overlooking the lake. The location was perfect, close enough to downtown to be convenient but removed from the agency corridor where we might run into former colleagues. The space itself was open concept, with high ceilings, abundant natural light, and state-of-the-art technology hidden behind an unassuming exterior. From the outside, it looked like any other creative studio or tech startup. One by one, my chosen team members arrived for their interviews. Each had their own story of disillusionment with Halden and Ruse. Each had been undermined or scapegoated in some way, and each brought unique skills that would be essential to our project. Milo Resnick arrived first, his lanky frame and perpetually disheveled appearance belying one of the sharpest technical minds I'd ever encountered. When I explained what we were building, his eyes lit up with the same excitement I remembered from our early collaborations. "They told me your prediction model was dead," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Called it speculative technology without practical application." Landon Pike's exact words, I confirmed. Milo snorted. Pike wouldn't recognize practical application if it was coding in his living room. I'm in. Sierra Washington came next, her analytical mind already racing ahead to the data architecture we would need. The tracking capabilities alone would revolutionize how brands understand customer journeys, she said, pacing as she thought aloud. And if we can predict behavior patterns in real time rather than retrospectively. She stopped and turned to me. This is what you tried to get them to greenlight for the Meridian account last year, isn't it? I nodded. Sierra had been the one who helped me compile the data that should have convinced the leadership team to invest in developing my model for Meridian Insurance, one of our largest accounts at the time. Pike killed it because he couldn't take credit for it, she said flatly. Count me in. I want to see his face when he realizes what he threw away. Jonas Kapoor, ever the voice of caution, asked the most questions. What's to stop them from claiming we stole proprietary information? What if they come after us? Legally? What's Blackheart's real interest in this? Valid concerns, all of which I had discussed extensively with Victor and his legal team. I showed Jonas the documentation we had prepared, proof that Halden and Rowe had formally removed the prediction model from all development roadmaps. Emails from leadership declining to pursue patents or trademarks for the technology. Performance reviews that explicitly directed me to focus on proven methodologies rather than experimental frameworks. They didn't just pass on it, I explained. They actively disavowed it, in writing. Jonas reviewed the documents carefully, then looked up at me with a slow smile. Always keep receipts, he said, echoing advice he had given me years ago when we first noticed the company's tendency to rewrite history. I'm in, but we'll need to be meticulous about documentation moving forward. Within 2 weeks, we had assembled our core team of 7, myself as project lead, Milo handling technical architecture, Sierra overseeing data analytics, Jonas managing quality assurance, plus 3 others who brought expertise in UX design, client implementation, and security protocols. All former Halden and Rowe employees, all exceptional at their jobs. All discarded for reasons that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with office politics. Victor provided everything we needed: cutting-edge hardware, software licenses, cloud computing resources, and complete autonomy. Our only regular contact with Blackhearth was a weekly progress meeting with Victor himself, who proved to be an ideal backer, engaged enough to provide valuable input but hands-off enough to let us work without interference. Our first task was rebuilding the core of my prediction model, which existed only in presentation decks and personal notes. Milo and I spent long nights translating theoretical frameworks into actionable code, while Sierra worked on data collection and analysis protocols that would feed the AI engine. The beauty of this system, I explained during one late-night session, is that it doesn't just track what consumers do, it understands why they do it, then predicts what they'll do next, all in real time. Traditional analytics tell you what happened yesterday. We're building something that tells you what will happen tomorrow. And adjusts content delivery accordingly, Milo added, typing furiously. If the system predicts a user is likely to engage with video content in the evening, but text content in the morning, it automatically optimizes for that without human intervention. Which means campaigns remain perpetually relevant, Sierra said, catching our excitement. No more set it and forget it marketing. This is continuous optimization at a level the industry hasn't seen before. We worked in a state of focused isolation, cut off from the advertising world we had once been part of. No industry events, no networking lunches, no social media presence. According to LinkedIn, most of us were taking time off or had moved to vaguely defined consultant roles. In reality, we were building something that would change everything. 3 months in, we had a working prototype. The system could ingest consumer behavior data, identify patterns, and make surprisingly accurate predictions about future engagement. It wasn't perfect. The AI sometimes made connections that seemed random until Sierra dug deeper and found the subtle correlations our human minds had missed. But it was impressive enough that Victor immediately authorized expansion of the team and additional resources. We need to test this in the wild, I told Victor during our weekly meeting. Controlled environments can only tell us so much. We need real consumers interacting with real content. Victor considered this, then nodded. I have a portfolio company that might work. Boutique skincare brand, direct-to-consumer model. Sophisticated enough to appreciate what we're building, but small enough to keep things quiet. The brand was Lumiere, not to be confused with Lumina, the account that had indirectly led to my firing. The coincidence wasn't lost on me. Lumiere agreed to be our guinea pig, integrating our system into their digital marketing efforts without knowing exactly who was behind it. As far as they were concerned, they were testing a new Blackhearth technology. The results exceeded even our optimistic projections. Within weeks, Lumiere saw engagement rates increase by 47%, conversion rates by 32%, and customer retention improved dramatically. Most importantly, the system was learning and evolving with each interaction, becoming more precise in its predictions and more effective in its content delivery. This is beyond proof of concept, Sierra said, analyzing the results. This is market-ready technology. 6 months after that humiliating dinner at Aurelia, we had a fully functional platform that was 3 times more effective than anything on the market. We called it Obsidian Spark, a nod to both our project code name and the idea of hidden fire, waiting to be revealed. The name was Victor's suggestion, and it fit perfectly. It's time to approach potential clients, Victor announced during our progress meeting. Selectively, of course. We're looking for companies that understand the value of what we've built and have the infrastructure to implement it effectively. And companies that currently work with Halden and Rowe, I suggested, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. Victor's expression remained neutral, but I caught a gleam in his eyes. If such companies happen to recognize superior technology when they see it, who are we to deny them the opportunity? Our first major client was Meridian Insurance, the very company I'd tried to convince Halden Rowe to develop my model for a year earlier. They had remained with the agency after my departure, but according to industry rumors, the relationship had been strained. We approached them through Blackhearth channels, presenting Obsidian Spark as a proprietary technology that could revolutionize their digital customer acquisition strategy. The meeting was held at Blackhearth's offices, with Victor making the introduction before stepping back to let my team present. I had worried about being recognized. David Werner, Meridian's CMO, had worked closely with me during my time at Halden and Rowe, but 7 months of being off the grid had changed me more than I realized. My hair was different. I'd lost weight from the stress and long hours, and most significantly, my demeanor had transformed. I was no longer the deferential agency executive, careful not to overstep. I was the creator of Obsidian Spark, and I owned the room. David didn't recognize me until halfway through the presentation. When I referenced a specific challenge Meridian had faced with their retirement planning products, something only someone with insider knowledge would understand. "Have we worked together before?" he asked, frowning slightly. I smiled. "In another life, perhaps. Shall I continue with the demonstration?" By the end of the meeting, Meridian had signed a letter of intent to implement Obsidian Spark across their digital platforms. As we were packing up, David approached me privately. "Amanda Griffin," he said quietly. "I thought you looked familiar. Last I heard, you were let go from Halden and Rowe." "News travels fast," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Not as fast as you might think. They've been unusually quiet about your departure. No announcement, no replacement named publicly." He glanced toward the door, ensuring we weren't overheard. "Between us, Landon Pike has been impossible to work with. Constantly changing direction, promising results he can't deliver." I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I was filing this information away. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," David said with a small smile. "After seeing what you've built here, I'm beginning to understand why he might have wanted you out of the picture." He extended his hand. "Meridian is looking forward to working with Obsidian Spark. And with you, Amanda." As David left, Victor approached, having observed our exchange from across the room. "Problem?" he asked. I shook my head. "Quite the opposite. It seems Halden and Rowe isn't thriving in my absence." "The first domino," Victor remarked. "Let's see how many more fall." Fall they did. Once Meridian implemented Obsidian Spark and began seeing results, word spread through the industry grapevine. We were selective about who we met with, focusing on companies that would benefit most from our technology, many of which happened to be Halden and Rowe clients. We never directly approached them, they came to us, drawn by whispers of a revolutionary platform that was transforming digital marketing. Effectiveness. Within 3 months, Halden and Rowe had lost 4 major accounts to Obsidian Spark. The agency was hemorrhaging clients, and according to our industry sources, the internal atmosphere had become toxic. Landon Pike was reportedly on a witch hunt, convinced that someone inside the agency was sabotaging client relationships. In a sense, he was right, though not in the way he imagined. Several of our team members still maintained friendships with former colleagues who had stayed at the Halden and Rowe. These friends provided regular updates on the agency's increasing desperation, including Pike's erratic leadership and mounting financial pressures. "He fired the entire UX department yesterday," Milo reported after a lunch with his former roommate, who still worked in the agency's IT department. Claimed they were colluding with outside forces to undermine client confidence. "That's 30 people," Jonas said, shocked, most of whom had nothing to do with strategy or client relationships. I felt a pang of guilt for those caught in the crossfire, but reminded myself that we weren't directly targeting Halden and Rowe. We were simply building something better and letting the market decide its value. If that decision happened to expose the hollowness of Landon Pike's leadership, so be it. 9 months after our project began, disaster struck Halden and Rowe. A technical glitch in their reporting system publicly exposed falsified performance metrics for several major campaigns. The discrepancies weren't minor. Conversion rates had been inflated by as much as 60%, and ROI calculations had routinely ignored significant cost centers. The scandal broke on industry news sites first, then spread to mainstream business publications. Clients demanded audits. The American Association of Advertising Agencies launched an ethics investigation, and Halden and Rowe's parent company announced an internal review. None of this was our doing. According to Sierra's former mentee, who still worked in the agency's analytics department, the falsification had begun shortly after Landon took over as CEO, when he realized the agency wasn't hitting the aggressive growth targets he had promised the board. He made us adjust the models. Sierra read from a text message her contact had sent. Said it was standard industry practice to present data in the most favorable light. When anyone objected, they were moved to different accounts or pushed out entirely. The text included a bombshell, an internal memo from Landon to the senior leadership team, written 6 months earlier, in which he dismissed my prediction model as unnecessarily complex and impossible to monetize. Effectively, the memo had been leaked anonymously to an industry watchdog blog. "This is why they got rid of you," Jonas said after reading the memo. "Your model would have created transparent, verifiable metrics. Pike couldn't manipulate those numbers without being caught." I thought back to that dinner at Aurelia, to Landon's smooth declaration that my approach was too traditional. The irony was staggering. He had fired me for being behind the times when, in reality, my innovation threatened his ability to cook the books. As Holden and Rowe spiraled into crisis, Obsidian Spark continued to grow. We now had 27 employees, a portfolio of premium clients, and a technology platform that was evolving daily. Victor had moved us to larger offices in a sleek downtown tower, still operating under the radar, but no longer hidden away like fugitives. Then came the cease and desist letter. It arrived via courier at Blackhearth's main office, addressed to Victor personally. The law firm representing Holden and Rowe demanded that Obsidian Spark immediately discontinue use of proprietary technologies and methodologies developed under the auspices of Holden and Rowe's innovation program. The letter specifically named me as having misappropriated confidential information and intellectual property. Victor forwarded the letter to me with a single question. "Ready?" I understood immediately. This was the moment we had prepared for from the beginning, the inevitable legal challenge that would force Obsidian Spark into the open. Our response had been crafted months ago by Blackhearth's legal team, supported by exhaustive documentation of Holden and Rowe's rejection of my model and subsequent abandonment of the technology. "Ready," I confirmed. The next day, our lawyers delivered a devastating response. Not only did we refute all claims of intellectual property theft, but we included evidence that Holden and Rowe had explicitly directed me to cease development of the prediction model, removed it from all official roadmaps, and reclassified it as speculative research without commercial application in multiple internal documents. More damaging still, we included testimony from former Holden and Rowe employees, not just those who had joined Obsidian Spark, but others who had witnessed the agency's systematic suppression of innovation that didn't align with Landon Pike's vision or couldn't be easily claimed as his own creation. The final blow was a series of emails between Landon and the agency's CFO, discussing how to manage client expectations regarding campaign performance. Emails that essentially outlined their approach to manipulating reporting metrics. These had been provided by an anonymous source within the agency and verified by independent forensic experts. Holden and Rowe's legal threat collapsed immediately. Not only did they withdraw the cease and desist, but they also sent a formal acknowledgement that Obsidian Spark's technology was distinct from any proprietary systems used by the agency. The retreat might have ended matters there, had an investigative reporter from Adweek not caught wind of the dispute. She reached out to me directly, requesting an interview about the emerging conflict between Holden and Rowe and the mysterious Obsidian Spark platform that's been luring away their clients. After consulting with Victor and our legal team, I agreed to a limited interview, my first public statement since leaving Holden and Rowe. The resulting article, titled "From Fired to Firing Back: How Amanda Griffin's Rejected Innovation Became Advertising's Hottest Technology," sent shockwaves through the industry. I was careful in my comments, focusing on the technology rather than personal grievances. But the facts spoke for themselves. I had developed a revolutionary approach to consumer behavior prediction. Holden and Rowe had repeatedly dismissed it, and after firing me in a public and humiliating manner, they were now watching helplessly as the very technology they had rejected transformed the industry. The article included a timeline of events, statements from clients who had switched to Obsidian Spark, and a particularly damning quote from a former Holden and Rowe executive who confirmed that Landon Pike had a history of claiming credit for others' innovations while discarding ideas he couldn't understand or control. Amanda Griffin's prediction model was years ahead of its time. The anonymous executive stated, "Landon killed it because it came from her, not him. Now he's reaping what he sowed." The fallout was swift and severe. Within a week of the article's publication, 3 more major clients announced they were reviewing their relationship with Halden and Rowe. The agency's stock price dropped 17% in a single day. The board called an emergency meeting. 2 days later, Landon Pike was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. His LinkedIn profile disappeared overnight. His industry podcast, Disruption Dialogues, released a brief statement that it would be on hiatus pending reorganization. Halden and Rowe announced a comprehensive restructuring, including the appointment of a new CEO, Diane Mercer, a respected industry veteran known for ethical leadership and technological innovation. In her first public statement, she acknowledged past missteps and promised a renewed commitment to transparency and creative integrity. It was over. In just under a year, we had gone from a secret project operating in the shadows to a recognized industry leader. Halden and Rowe hadn't collapsed entirely, but its reputation had been severely damaged. And Landon Pike, the man who had humiliated me in front of colleagues and clients, had been utterly discredited. 13 months after that fateful dinner at Aurelia, Obsidian Spark held a formal launch event announcing our expansion into European and Latin American markets. As the founder and newly appointed Chief Technology Officer, I gave a brief speech to the assembled industry leaders, journalists, and team members. I didn't mention Landon Pike or Halden and Rowe. I didn't need to. Instead, I spoke about innovation, about persistence, about the power of believing in your ideas even when others dismiss them. I never needed to shout that they were wrong, I concluded, looking out at the faces of people who had once doubted or dismissed me. I just needed to build what they said was impossible, and let it speak for itself. The applause was deafening. As I stepped away from the podium, Victor appeared at my side. A rare public appearance for the usually private investor. Satisfied? He asked quietly. I thought about the question carefully. Was I satisfied? The revenge had been complete, more thorough than I could have imagined when I walked out of Aurelia that night. Landon Pike was professionally ruined. The agency that had discarded me was diminished. And I had built something revolutionary, something that would outlast any personal vendetta. Not satisfied, I finally answered. Just getting started. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around me, I received a text from Sierra. You should see this. Attached was a photo taken by an acquaintance who worked in a co-working space in the West Loop. It showed Landon Pike sitting alone at a shared desk, watching the live stream of our launch event on a laptop with mediocre resolution. No assistant hovering nearby, no executive perks, just a man whose name no one said anymore. I deleted the photo without responding. I didn't need to see Landon Pike brought low. I needed to see Obsidian Spark soaring high. And as I rejoined my team, brilliant minds who had been undervalued, overlooked, and discarded, I knew we were just beginning to reach our potential. My name is Amanda Griffin. Once, I was fired in public by a man who thought he was ending my career. Instead, he inadvertently launched a revolution. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building something so magnificent that their absence becomes irrelevant. And that's exactly what we did.